As leaders, we very seldom take those opportunities.
Right.
We're always looking at the next bar, the next event. When we have to go back, we owe that to our families. When I look at my wife and my three daughters, I have to be the best that I can be. When I tell someone I'm going to mentor them, I have to be the best that I can be. In order for me to be the best that I can be, I have to go back and I have to dress and I have to heal and address those things where I was barely surviving those different milestones in life. They don't just go away.
All right, welcome back to today's show. You are watching Leader Seeds, the podcast, the video format version of that kicks off every week. I'm so glad you joined us today because we have a very, very exciting conversation. I know I might say that a lot, but we work hard to get these really exceptional guests to have some refreshing conversations on our podcast. Today specifically, we're talking to Colonel Joe Delaney. Joe has 30 years as a Marine leader that's passionate about personal and professional development.
Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for being here. We chatted a bit in the beginning to get things situated, and as excited as I was coming up to the meeting, I've gotten much more exciting just even in our pre-chat before we started recording. So thank you for being here today. And you're actually connecting in right on the islands today, right here in Hawaii, correct?
I am. I've been here for about 6.5 years, and Hawaii is my home now.
Outstanding. Because I know a few times in the virtual world, we're connecting with people from, throughout the world, throughout the states,
Absolutely.
Internationally sometimes. And it's really cool to kind of have a connection right here in the islands. You said you've been here for 6 years. Maybe how did you make that transition over, and where did you currently come from?
I actually came here from Okinawa, Japan, and I came here for a command assignment, what we call in the military an 06 command.
Mm-hmm.
And following that, I had an opportunity to stay on island and take on a new assignment. And following that assignment, I had one final opportunity to take on what will be my last assignment.
Your last assignment. I hear a connection of assignments and a final assignment. So it seems like Hawaii's somewhat sticking, maybe almost you'd say your home base right now in this season.
It is. It was never the plan, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
It's such a great place, right? A beautiful paradise. And Okinawa, Japan, I've heard so many great things. I have some family out there also. And I just want to thank you for your service, your continued service, just like for all the service men and women out there and the veterans. That's why I think I'm excited about today's conversation, Joe. 30 years as a Marine leader that's passionate about professional and personal growth. Help us start on that journey for anyone listening in right now that maybe they're at the beginning and they're trying to figure out things, right? What am I going to do when I get older? Maybe they have a first leadership assignment. If you could take us back to when you started your leadership journey and tell us a little bit how that got started.
Absolutely. And it's really easy in hindsight. The things that you don't know when you're starting out. I grew up in a military family, so the foundations of the military were already present. The discipline and the order. And then you introduce sports, team sports, soccer, basketball, and then things like Cub Scouts, high school ROTC, college ROTC. And all of that really came together when I joined the Marine Corps, when I enlisted in the Marine Corps around 1990 and headed off to boot camp. And you begin to see all of those leadership lessons come together that were already present, but you really didn't know it. But in hindsight, I could see it very well and realize that I was being developed without even knowing it from the time my parents were introducing lessons into just my daily life.
Wow. So you recognize that, like you said, in hindsight, you recognize a lot of these, maybe in our language here in the podcast, we say these seeds that was somewhat sown in your upbringing. And now you see somewhat of the harvest that's coming from that, right? Seeds that was intentional. And maybe you didn't recognize it in that season. Give us a few, for example, like what's a few of those that you've seen the harvest of those seeds that you got through sports and through, through your parents and different things that you went through?
One of the ones I recognized the most was the value of just being on the team. I never set out to be the leader in any of those organizations. I set out to be a member of the team to see how I could serve, how I could play the game, play the ball, play soccer, play basketball. I wanted to be on the drill team in high school ROTC. I wanted to be on the color guard. I wanted to be part of the Cub Scouts and Weeblos and then Boy Scouts. But I never knew that what I was doing was building my leadership. I wanted to serve in the food drive and serve the community at all the different outreach opportunities that my parents enabled or my high school instructors enabled. But I never knew how important that attitude of serving or just wanting to be on the team would be to eventually feed into my leadership that I have today.
Wow. One of the best things I love about these conversations we have when you bring in guests like yourself, Joe, is I love that connection that you just kind of made to that, well, what we call a seed, right? To that discipline, to what was sown into you, because that right there, just the importance of just being on the team, not really seeking a certain role of authority or to be better or above anyone. The importance of just being on a team. And when that assignment comes, right, when we are a leader, when we are appointed a leader or called to that position, we're not so disconnected, right? I mean, I see some leaders struggle where they're leading the team, but they're not on the team. It's kind of like they're just in the role, and it's such a frustrating. It's so hard to do. So I love that in these natural conversations, like you said, you saw that right now in hindsight, that importance of just being on the team, like not really seeking the role as a leader, maybe today, but really learning what it is to be part of a team. Right. Would you have a specific example you could share with us about I know I'm digging here, but I just love to kind of, I want this to come to life for somebody listening right now, like that's seeing this in a sense of what team they could be a part of in sports or in scouts, like you mentioned, or anything. I know you're part of a different activities and things in life, and maybe something you're doing now to just be part of the team. Is there a specific example you could share?
I want to say that I really value your approach to planting seeds. Because if I can do anything, if my story or my example can help anyone that might see themselves as a leader or might not see themselves as a leader, and that can help them grow. I remember as a young Marine reservist, I was always being volunteered or volunteering or being voluntold. And at that time, you learn that those bring about opportunities. I remember being voluntold to carry a machine gun one time as we would go on different hikes and different field evolutions. But it also meant I got to be the first one to shoot the machine gun. But it also meant that I had to clean that, no matter how many other people might have contributed to that weapon getting pretty filthy throughout the course of our field evolution. But it was an opportunity. And there's many others like that by taking those opportunities, whether it's being squad leader, the road guide, the crossing guide, and being the flashlight on a hike, the man out front or the man in the back, all those opportunities, they bring you recognition, but you're not doing it for that reason. You're doing it to serve. Right. And in the end, people start to recognize you, and you start to learn more and more about yourself, what your capabilities are. Whereas if all you're ever doing is following and doing the bare minimum, you'll never have those opportunities. And when you look in the mirror, you just won't have that self-reflection to see when you were growing and learning and developing.
Wow. I love that. As long as you'll never have the opportunity if you're just following and doing the bare minimum, right? Yeah. What a great kind of, I think, call to put light on, like put some light on that for a little bit, because that can be the default, right? I mean, even in a leadership role, I've seen a lot of people that just kind of just do the bare minimum, and it's like, hey, I'm just here to show up. I'm not here to go above and beyond. I'm not, but you're not doing it for a role. It's like you're doing it for you, because you grow, right? We continue to grow. So it's that investment in how can I grow? And that connection, or like you mentioned, where you said something about, with the, what kind of gun was it? What kind of,
we'll just call it a machine gun.
Machine gun. Okay. So the machine gun of being the first to fire it. And it's like, my mind said, it's like you get the first to, as a leader, right? You're first to experience something. You're first with the news. You're first with this, but you're also the first to clean it. You're also right. So that discipline and that consequence goes both ways to keep a really balanced view in leadership. When do you think you started to see yourself as a leader? Do you think it was something kind of maybe embedded in your youth? I know some people experience that, and others have this time when they finally start to see what others seen in them. I'm curious for yourself, which one would it be for you?
I didn't come in the Marine Corps to stay in the Marine Corps. I came in the Marine Corps to become a Marine and then go do other things in life. And the first time I really saw it was I had a boss who I had lots of bosses who micromanaged, but I had this leader who he was several hundred miles away and gave me complete autonomy. And it was the first time that I realized the weight that was on my shoulders of there wasn't someone else I could emulate. If I hadn't already learned by then, there was no one else. I had no peers in that particular organization. And I had to make a lot of decisions. And that meant I made a lot of mistakes. But I really began to see myself as I would look in the mirror. And it was one of those, I was a captain by then, but it was one of those, what now, Lieutenant moments
Mm-hmm.
when you start to wonder, oh, crap, Joe, what are you going to do now? This is completely on your shoulders. And what are you going to do about this situation? And yeah, I made some mistakes, but it was the first time I really began to realize that I was the leader. I was responsible, and everything that happened, as well as everything that didn't happen in that organization, was on my shoulders.
Mm-hmm. I call them like those, for myself, it's those fill the shoes moment. When you start to, you feel the filling of the shoes that you've been trying to fit in. And I know for me, I'll share a personal story just on that really quickly. I found it very difficult when I kept trying to fill the shoes that someone else left. Like when there's a transition, when I step into a role that another leader did really well and exceptional in, I almost set a bar that was a different kind of shoes. It was a different armor, but it wasn't fit for me. And it was confusing. It was challenging, right? It brought up a bunch of things inside of me. And now that I think about it, maybe that was the good part of it, right? It brings things out of you. But what I've learned after is like the shoes you want to fill is the shoes that's fit for you. So as you share that is like you were starting to realize these shoes that was fit for you. This armor, if we want to say, that was fit for you and the battle that you are set to lead. But you started to see that feeling of it, or maybe I'd say step in it, right? Like you said, it's like, the time is now. Like this is it. And you said you were a captain at that time?
Right. I had just been promoted to captain. I had
Wow.
already had a lot of leadership experiences, but I
Right.
think it was just kind of going through the motions. You know what to do, you're taught what to do, you train for it, but the reality hadn't set in yet of, I'm the guy in charge.
Right. Do you think, I mean, being there at a captain, all the hindsight, all the experiences you had as a leader, like you said already, what do you think it was that kind of sparked that? Do you think you mentioned that leader that really poured into you overseas? Did they say something? Did something click within you? Did you see things differently? Was there a shift?
I think prior to that point, there was always a peer of mine that had a similar type organization. There was always somebody at the club that was talking about some of the same things I was going through. There was a boss that was maybe only 10, 15 feet away from me, that there was a gunnery sergeant or a senior NCO that was right there. But for the first time, I was very autonomous and I enjoyed it. So it was that fear coupled with that excitement that I really said, wow, this is something I want to do for a long time. Up until that point in the career, up until that point in my career, I had already met my goal. I had stayed in for 4 years, pinned on captain, and I had a resume. And right about that time is where I stopped updating my resume. I said, I absolutely love what I'm doing, and I'm going to do this for a long time. I didn't define a long time. I was just going to keep doing it because I enjoyed the autonomy. I enjoyed the span of control I had. I was away from any Marine Corps base, and I do love Marine Corps bases. However, this was the first time I was actually a Marine detachment commander, and we like to say, you're afraid and alone, and it's just one of those things that you look forward to, the opportunity to have everything you learn come together and be able to prove kind of to yourself, not to anyone else, that you have the capability to do this. And you feel it inside. You don't need anyone to tell you. You don't need an evaluation. It's something you feel inside.
So well said. So well said. There's something that just kind of it just that's why I think in my interpretation was like the shoe, you realize that the shoe fits. Like you don't need someone else to pour in. It just clicks, it sets. There's a feeling you mentioned inside. And I think what I love about it is there's this acceptance. And you brought it up so well. There's this mixed emotion. You said there's excitement and then there's fear, right? There's so much going on in our mind. And I think that brings great comfort to someone that's experiencing that, right? So if anyone's
Absolutely.
listening in right now, and for the listeners right now, it's mixed with a lot of that, because it can be confusing, right? Sometimes I know if it's like you're working so hard for something and then I just pictured it of being this glorious moment, right? And it's like, no, it's a really mixed emotion of so much going on, and you see it from like multiple perspectives at one point. Which brings me to a great moment to pause, and we're going to take a quick break right now to give some thanks to our sponsors for today's show. But we're going to come right back after this, listeners. So stay with me, because we're going to hear what Joe did at that point to continue where he's at now, to have 30 plus years as a Marine leader, and we're going to even learn more of what he's working on currently and looking forward to right now. So a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Bridget from the Beehive. Yesterday, Beehive Las Vegas hosted our back to school event. We helped over 100 children receive free backpacks and free school supplies. We wanted to say thank you to our community for all the donations. If you want to find out more about the Beehive, please look for our IG at the Beehive Buzz.
And we're back. Thank you to our sponsors for today's show. That's why we're on so many awesome platforms, because there's more hands that are here to help serve you, our listeners here. Today, we're talking to Colonel Joe Delaney. Sir, thank you for your time here and opening up, on how all of this started, from your upbringing, from your parents and sports and all these, we say seeds, right? All these seeds that was sown in your life. Could you share with us maybe what made you want to join the Marines? Share us a little bit about that moment.
For the Marines, a lot of Marines will tell you becoming a Marine is more of a calling. There's something inside of you. When I was in 7th grade, I saw a Marine drill team led by a Marine Master Sergeant who later became a good friend of mine much later in life, Ray Schneider, Vietnam-era Marine. And I loved everything about what I saw, and I never forgot that. So as soon as I joined high school, I joined the ROTC, the program that he led. That led me to, as soon as I left high school, I walked into the recruiter's office. And I was kind of a dream for the recruiter, because they didn't have to go looking for me. I said, where do I sign up? But it wasn't as easy as it sounds. I was born with a birth defect called a cleft palate. And I was rejected over and over and over again. I was actually rejected for an officer program that I was encouraged to apply to. And that's part of what encouraged me to enlist. But I was originally rejected from enlisting. And I had to go through many surgeries and apply for many waivers in order to become a Marine. And even after becoming a Marine, I went to a historically Black college and university. And I also grew up primarily in the inner city at that time of my life. So when I first joined the Marine Corps, the demographics just didn't match what I was used to. And I struggled. And my struggle had absolutely nothing to do with my peers' acceptance of me at all. It was all things that were inside of me. It was all things that I had to believe that I was good enough to become a Marine. I had to believe that I belonged and not worry about what I saw around me, but find the inner strength to continue to succeed. And that's part of why those first few years in the Marine Corps were very challenging. It wasn't because of the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is phenomenal. It was because I had a lot of growing to do with my own self-worth and my self-belief, to believe that I could do exactly what I saw around me, when there were very few examples at that time in the Marine Corps in the early 90s.
Wow. The thought of joining the Marines already comes with a handful of obstacles, right? There's already a standard. There's already a raising of the bar for anyone before they even make that decision. And you were there already having your own obstacles, right? So coming into it, making that decision, having your own obstacles, like you mentioned, with the multiple surgeries and the different in your upbringing. And then one of the biggest parts, thank you for sharing that. Like, there's our external challenges,
Yes.
but at the same time, they're only amplified, if you want to say, because of our internal challenges. These internal obstacles that was starting to kind of, I mean, well, I don't want to put this in your, you didn't say this specifically. Maybe I heard this, but tell us a little bit more about when you say these internal challenges about, seeing yourself as a leader or just seeing your worth and all of that, did you see it at the moment or did you think that kind of is more something you see later?
It's absolutely something you see later, with the exception of having a mentor, somebody in your life that can guide you specifically, which I did have those people at times. But you have to work really hard when you're a minority of any race, gender, population group, doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
Anytime you are different than anyone else, you have to work a little bit harder on your belief system. If you add that, the fact that you and I are both here on a podcast means that we are striving to do slightly more with our life than whatever the average is. So if you take that into account, we're always raising the bar. We're always trying to be better than we are. So we never truly arrive. And if you're struggling in any area that's dangerous, you have to somehow separate the idea that you are not good enough, because you are, but because you're raising the bar so high, you're not good enough to be at that level yet, the level that you're working towards. But if you're struggling in an area, that can be pretty dangerous. There's a very delicate balance between knowing that you are good, but you're just not good enough for the goals that you've set for yourself, even though you are working towards it.
So you see that from hindsight, and you now we're looking back in it. We get a chance to see these seeds and these values in it at that moment, and everyone that's even listening right now is getting the benefit of seeing that along with us as they're listening to the journey. So if you put yourself in those shoes, what do you think helped you keep going? Because sometimes I'm thinking, like, for the person that's listening right now that doesn't have this perspective of hindsight, if when you were in there and you had these challenges upon challenges, that the training already brought on itself, but at the same time, a lot of it is just kind of this inner work that was going on. What do you think really just kept you saying, you know what, I'm gonna show up tomorrow. I'm gonna show up tomorrow. I'm gonna show up tomorrow, and and just kind of keep one day at a time.
Every one of us has a gift in life. Every one of us has passions and a purpose in life. And the hard part is, for some people, if they're looking at their purpose and they're using what I'm saying as an example of how they're going to stay in the Marine Corps, it may not work for them, but it will work for them in life. Is you have to be aligned with your purpose, your passion, your purpose. For me, my passion was the people. That happened to help me get further in the Marine Corps, because I was very focused on helping people find the purpose, helping them understand the purpose for their lives, helping them identify the mission, the purpose of the organization that we were in. You can call it, if you're wearing a uniform and you understand commander's intent, but what is the mission? What is the vision of an organization? And how does that apply to you as an individual? But I've always believed in going one step further and helping people understand how they personally align to that mission. So it wasn't good enough to just conquer the hill. There's times when you can only focus on conquering the hill or conquering the objective. But then I want to know a little bit about you and what drives you and what inspires you and what you do when you're not wearing the uniform. So that's where I poured my energy into, and not even realizing early on that was one of the core tenets of the Marine Corps, is really understanding your Marines, knowing your Marines and employing them within their capabilities. And that attributed to my success tremendously. And it continues to contribute to my success inside and outside of the Marine Corps.
I want to thank you for that gift that you just shared. We spoke about a gift and about having purpose and passion. And I think as you were sharing that, you were also giving the listeners, myself, the gift right now of really just seeing that. I wrote a note here, the people. And when you say the people, my mind said, a lot of times when I'm struggling, a lot of times when I'm stuck, or when there's an overflow of challenges, I'm looking at everything that I have to carry, but it almost dissipates as soon as I start to see how I can serve someone else, how I can pour into someone else, whether it's a glass of water or it's a moment of attention that I can give them, right? Because even in the toughest financial seasons, when you can't afford to give something monetary, you can give attention to someone, and the value on just somebody knowing that you're there and they're heard and they're supported and they're valued as a person, right?
Right.
That can expound in so many different ways. So you mentioned that scene, that shift in that selfless service, that shift. And I know we say it, I know that might be common language in military, but just because it's on the walls doesn't mean it's in our heart, right? We see it in signs, we see it on policies, but there has to be a point when you really internalize that. And sometimes it's those challenging times. Wouldn't you agree? It's the times when things are a little bit extra tough.
I would, and that's where you get into I'll share an opinion, and maybe this is from years of reading and my own personal experiences, but this is the difference between competency and leadership. And you can be very competent and be in a position of power, and you can lead people to accomplish a mission because you are very, maybe technically competent. However, it doesn't mean you are a leader. And that's a very nuanced use of the word, and I know that when I say it. But leadership is really identifying that purpose, that passion, and inspiring other people to bring their best self to the mission, to that purpose. It's not just accomplishing the mission. That doesn't make you a great leader. It's all about what are people really giving you. Your technical and tactical competence is required, but there's another layer to that. It's that passion you have for the people. Otherwise, you'll accomplish the mission. Those people will look at you as their company commander, their battalion commander, their CEO, you name it. But they won't look at you as a leader. Years later, they won't see you and think, man, that was a great leader. They'll say, oh, that was a good battalion commander. And it depends on what do you want to be known for in life. Ultimately, do you want to be known as inspiring people to be their best?
I agree 100%. I mean, if I had emojis right now, I'd throw them all on the screen, just 100 emoji all over the place. I agree 100%. I heard it said before, similar to what you're saying, is like, it's only lonely at the top when you forget the most important thing, which is people, right?
Yeah.
So because we grow up with sometimes these wrong connections. It's lonely at the top. I don't want to, pursue greatness, and I don't want to see the best in myself or my full potential. It's lonely at the top. No, but it's only when we forget the most important thing, and that's the people. It's connecting with the people. If our drive is just to excel ourselves, like you said, in competence, right? If we're getting smarter, and there's nothing against that. We grow as leaders. We believe both in learning more and educating, but at the same time, realizing that the priority is always people. The priority is always making sure we're connecting with people and getting better at connecting with people and knowing people even better. I shared on a few podcasts back about a situation similar for myself where I noticed a fellow coworker that I was working with, and he was the greatest salesman. He outsold me. He knew all of the when I was working at a bank for a season. But long story short, when he stepped into a leadership role, he really struggled because he knew his product much better than his people. He's like he didn't know how to help other people do what he did. And once he started to make that shift and he started to raise everyone else up, that's when, like how you mentioned, they didn't see him as just the branch manager or the director or their battalion sergeant or whatever it is. They seen him beyond the role. They seen him as somebody that cared more about me. They seen him, that somebody that kind of poured into themselves, which takes us, I think, to a great point, because you just got some great news recently of something that came around your birthday or your birthday time, of something that a lot of us strive for. And I'd love to hear one quick part before we take a break on what was one of the initial thoughts you had when you got that news. And I won't share it. You can share it with the listeners. But when you got that news, what was one of the first thoughts that crossed your mind?
So the news is that the Marine Corps just approved my retirement. And even though that's something that sounds procedural or even administrative, it is validation that it's time for me to move on to the next chapter. So even though you might think, well, that's not a big deal, for someone who served 31 years, it tells me that it's time to take my passion, my gifts. And I've always strived to be an authentic leader in the Marine Corps, but now it's time for me to go do something else. And really, the sky's the limit. I'm only going to be held back by myself ultimately. And I'm just excited to learn from people like yourself, from some of the listeners out there, and see what's possible. I'm excited for what I've done, but I'm also excited for what's left to be done.
And we're going to take a quick break to learn much more of what's ahead from Colonel Joe Delaney.
With everything changing so quickly, it can be hard to keep your team growing together. Learning better communication and keeping up with effective strategies can be difficult when you have so much more to do. That's why Po'okela Chief Development and Leadership Strategies are here to support you in your training and development goals. Who do you know that is looking to improve your staff meetings, engage one-on-one communication, scale your organization to the next level, or bring in a dynamic speaker for your next event? Now back to the show.
We're back in the show. Thank you for sticking with us here. And I think you'll be excited. In fact, I know if you're listening to this, you're going to pat yourself on the back. This part is going to make, I'm going to share this podcast. You're going to share it with a friend, because what we're going to shift in right now is you learned a lot about where, Joe shared about his upbringing, and then a recent announcement that he just made right before he took a commercial break. But the announcement that he made was that he was just awarded retirement. And for a lot of people, that's when you arrive. That's the end of the book. That's the end of the story. Like, who thinks beyond retirement nowadays, right? Well, we're going to hear exactly what his thoughts are in that process. So, Joe, you share with us a first thought. Can you also share with us right now in the time, like how close are you to it? Give us some real timestamp right now on today. It's December 1st today, 2022. A real timestamp of where's your focus right now in this whole process?
Okay, if I can be transparent, since you're putting me on the spot, which I don't mind at all. I love being open because it might help someone else. Is the way the military works. Your retirement becomes approved ideally a long time before you actually take the uniform off. So my actual date when I will be a civilian is 1 September 2023. And I've been focused on that date for a long time, but not intentionally. And I will actually take the uniform off right around the March-April timeframe for the last time. And I will have a ceremony and the reality will hit. But what I didn't realize that no one can truly prepare you for is, as much as you would like to believe that uniform doesn't form your identity, it is a part of your identity. And there's no way you can do something and be all in for 30 plus years, or even 20, or really even much less time than that, depending on your level of commitment, and not feel the loss of identity and not feel the emotions that are overwhelming at times. As you start to go through the self-discovery and you start to realize, despite everything I've done, that by all means, by all Marine Corps measures, I have been successful, not because I'm a colonel, and not because I was a major or captain. It's because I served, because I made a commitment to do something in life, and I did it. And now I'm not going to be doing that anymore. So now I have to do the self-discovery of finding out what is my true purpose in life, what are my gifts, what do I really want to do with the rest of my life, because I'm only 51 years old. So I'm really, in my mind, I'm just getting started. My body has a few more aches and pains than it did when I signed up when I was 17. But that's okay, because the rules change a little bit, but I'm still having fun. And now it's time to find out what's next.
Thank you for being so transparent and really putting us in the moment of where you're at right now. Really there's a part of excitement, like you mentioned, of what you're looking forward to, but a great realization and a distinction of where, if you do anything that long, and you develop you overcome so much obstacles, right? The relationships you build in there is so the impact that you make, even though you're doing it from to serve other people, there's so much that comes with that consistent growth. But you're continuing to grow, even though there's a transition of maybe uniform and maybe of title or role. You shared with me before we even started something that you're passionate about is growth as a leader, to continue to grow as a leader. And I thought it was perfect, because you've been consistently growing throughout your life, throughout your career. And though there's a part of turning of the page in your retirement, it isn't the end of the book. It's a chapter. right? It might even be a paragraph, right? But we get to determine that it's like, this isn't closing of the book. This isn't game over. This is actually, there's much more in that process. So what is something you're excited to continue to grow in as you see this page start to shift in your life?
I'm excited to understand how the rest of the world works. I've had a lot of interaction with corporate America, but nothing from the inside. So I'm excited about executive coaching, leadership development. I have 30 years of experience in IT and cyber. Collectively, that gives me a lot of opportunities. But do I honestly know what that looks like? No, I don't. And I don't want to pretend and give anyone the impression that I have anything figured out. I am absolutely trusting the process. There are a lot of people who've already done this, who have reached out. They provide mentorship. And for the first time in my life, and this is a great point for me to bring this up, for the first time in my life, I've truly learned in the last 3 to 4 years to ask for help. Now, I wish I had done that a lot sooner with many other things in my career, because even though I might have received coaching or mentorship based on a specific problem, I didn't do that consistently. And now with transition, it is so scary at times. It is, you might look at a podcast and see, I don't know what your impression of me is, but you might think that I have it all figured out because I'm a Marine colonel with 30 plus years of service, leading different organizations across the world, deployments, all that stuff that some people admire. However, I don't have it all figured out. None of us do, because we are doing something new. And what you don't get to see in this short podcast is the times that I was broken, the times that I didn't know which way I was going to go, the times that I really needed help to get to the next level. You don't get to see that in this snippet of time that we're sharing with you today.
I appreciate you for sharing that on so many levels, that courageous spirit that you have to really, to even think about it, right? To just reflect on those moments that were broken. And I know for myself that, there's some days where it's some tough days where you're just like, this is it. Like it feels like everything's falling apart and it feels like nothing's going right. And you may have experienced, similar situations. And those times, even though it was as intense as it would give me this kind of refocus, to refocus on the priorities and to refocus on, why am I really doing this? Like why do I wake up every day and continue to want to grow? Why do I want, like, nobody's making me do it. Nobody's going to be upset if I don't do it. Like you mentioned, where nobody's going to have an order for you after you retire. Right? You're not going to be doing things because there's an order for it to be done or an assignment, but you're assigning yourself. You're looking out there and there's a purpose there. And I know some things, just by connecting with you earlier, some things that's really important with you. I see, your investment with your family and, investment in your health and different parts, right? I really believe the health of a leader is such an important component that we really try to talk about on the show. And it's beyond the role, right? It's beyond the role that we have at work or in our business, whether it's CEO or colonel or, whatever the role that that leadership position gives us. But really, a leader is so much more than that. Their dad, their husband or wife, their brother. There's so much more in that component, and all of those are very important because they interact with one another. If one is really hard, if one is struggling, then it's going to affect the other parts. I know you mentioned a commonality with that, and part of where your heart really is, your passion in that. If you could share with anyone listening right now that maybe is really looking at their role as a leader or aspiring to be a certain role, or really just kind of having these blinders on and just looking at the position, and maybe the importance of seeing the whole leader in that process.
When I think about a leader, the first thing I think about is someone who is thriving. They are thriving in their career. They have it all together and they're doing really well. And the military as a whole, they put a lot of demands on us, rightfully so. We have a very important mission. But even in the civilian community, there are very important missions as well. They just measure it by different standards or different metrics, depending on what shareholders want or what the primary purpose of those organizations are. But if you're always thriving, that doesn't protect you from normal life. And the minute you get a promotion, you're evolving. You're evolving for just a moment, but the gap is not very long before you're expected to be thriving again. So you're always operating at that very high intensity level. You're always raising the bar, going to the next level. But when do we go back to address those events in life where we were just barely surviving? Because we all have those moments. I had a divorce many years ago, and I barely survived during that time period. I've experienced the illness of a child, a critical illness, and that was a barely surviving moment. I've experienced combat where I witnessed some things and I was involved in some things where I was barely surviving again. And I'm mainly talking about emotionally and mentally. At some point in time, you can't just continue to thrive. You have to go back and you have to address those things that you were just barely surviving from. But as leaders, we very seldom take those opportunities. Right. We're always looking at the next bar, the next event. But we have to go back. We owe that to our families. When I look at my wife and my 3 daughters, I have to be the best that I can be. When I tell someone I'm going to mentor them, I have to be the best that I can be. In order for me to be the best that I can be, I have to go back and I have to address and I have to heal and address those things where I was barely surviving, those different milestones in life. They don't just go away. You have to do whatever you have to do so that way you can thrive in your ultimate purpose in life.
Thank you for being so real. When we're chatting right now, I think I'm reminded that people want leadership to be real. They don't want, Craig Rochelle always says, right? They want the leader that's real, not the leader that's always right. And a lot of times in leadership, we think we always have to have the right answer or say the right thing or even do the right thing, right? But that real approach, that real where, hey, I'm struggling right here and I need to heal and I want to be the best, that I can be. And in order to be the best, I have to heal. I have to ask for help, like you mentioned, knowing when to ask for help and being willing to go back to those places that were, you said the word, we thrive in some areas, and then there's other areas where we're somewhat struggling, right? And maybe it's not thriving. And it feeds us to just stay in the area that we're thriving in, right?
Yeah.
I have a similar situation. Thank you for sharing, and I'm so sorry for those tough challenges that you went through and you've come through.
Yeah.
But similar in my world, where I remember when when you're winning awards at work, you want to stay at work, and I voluntarily stay extra because the other places in my life I wasn't, and I was struggling and I was failing and I was not doing well, and it was hard to really go back there and say, okay, I got to give this area more attention and not just try to avoid it, right? Even though the other areas was giving me awards and you're getting, so there's a form of success in one area that dilutes the rest. And I think we really connect on what you're talking about on, hey, the whole health of a leader is important. It's seeing the person beyond the role. And coming from someone like you with 30 plus years as a colonel in the Marines that has overcome even challenges like you mentioned, from the multiple surgeries that you've had to relationships and just different things, you continue to go out there and you have a smile. I mean, when I think I see a picture, you have such a delight on your face, brother, to be honest with you. From what I've known, I'm just like, I don't think he has a bad day. And I know that's crazy because we all do, but you still have such a good presence. Like what you bring, the energy you bring in the room, the presence you bring in the room is always, I want to guess, is always welcome. And with that, how do you do that? How do you continue to show up? And I'm guessing I know, but I don't want to make an assumption. I just want to really call that to mind for anybody that's listening to this, but they can't see you smiling in your face. Just seeing you, and I'm sure for people that know you, they'd agree 100% with me that you're definitely somebody that doesn't have so much of a stern look or just kind of, and there's not wrong with that. It's just an observation I mentioned that, when I'm looking at here, we're talking here today, I'm like, yeah, I know we all have our challenges, but you still show up with a smile. You still show up, and it's like you find this way to reposition yourself right on your purpose and what you're doing. And
yeah,
if you could, what does that look like? If someone's struggling with that, what should they do? What should they do? We all have challenges. What should they do?
You have to have a greater purpose in life. You have to have something, no matter what it is, that gets you out of bed in the morning. And it can't just be your spouse. It needs to be something that's even greater than that, whatever it is. So now I'm going to put myself out there, but I have a challenge to encourage someone every single day. And that's hard because there's some days where I just don't feel like it.
Right.
But encouragement might mean that I'm going to call someone up and I'm going to speak to them on the phone for an hour. It might mean that I'm going to meet with them at Starbucks. It might mean that I'm going to send them a very short meme to say, hey, I'm praying for you today, or I'm thinking about you because you crossed my mind. I get up every morning and I just sit down with a cup of coffee and I think about the things that I'm grateful for. And when you have a spirit of gratefulness, and that wasn't intuitive. I mean, there's some days that are rougher than others. But I also read a lot. I listen to a lot of media podcasts, and it just constantly feeds my self-encouragement. It constantly gives me something else to aim towards. So I've made the decision that my minimum bar is encouraging one person a day, whether it's through a speaking engagement, whatever that looks like. But that's bigger than me. And every now and then you'll get someone that you didn't even know, but they send you a text, or you see them a year later and they tell you what that meant to them. And you realize that, oh my gosh, they were facing who knows what. And your call was the thing that made a difference. So it doesn't have to be that. It could be something totally different. But whatever it is, you have to have a purpose that is greater than yourselves. And that's really what keeps a smile on my face.
I'm the same. Well, not exactly the same. I love handwritten notes. I keep every single one that was given to me. On the tough days, I reread them. I just do. It helps remind me, when we're thinking so hard on ourselves, we can be our own enemy. And when I'm having those days, it really helps to be reminded to look and to open up I have a box, and to open up the box and to see some really nice notes that people wrote to me and some encouraging letters that people wrote. And I don't even look at the date. I just remember I get to a few of those, and it just helps me once again to remember, not to kind of feed in a sense, but just to really dilute and push away all those negative and really tough situations that I'm really hammering myself with. So being on the receiving end of that, I want to thank you for being somebody that taking a commitment to daily encourage someone. And I've also taken somewhat of a similar one. I do it on Mondays, where I write thank you notes. I write 3 thank you notes every Monday before I start to work, because Mondays it's tough to jump into work and get things going. Yeah. But I notice if I write 3 thank you notes, I'm in a much better place to go ahead and get things done for the week. It just starts my week well. And I like the handwritten still. I still do that. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to take one last break for today to thank one of our sponsors, and we'll be back with somewhat of a bonus section, because we're going to learn a little bit about what's at the core of Colonel Joe Delaney.
Thanks to the generous donations from people like you, we were able to provide 100 students with supplies to go back to school. To find out more about the Beehive Women and Teens, check out our website, thebeehivewomen.com, or our social media platforms, The Beehive Buzz.
All right, this is a bonus section right now, I want to call it, right? We're back from another break. Thank you to our sponsors. And if you're still watching Leader C's podcast, you, my friend, are amazing. Your commitment to kind of stick it through. But I also want to know, you're probably here because this conversation was pretty powerful, right? We're talking to Colonel Joe Delaney, and we're learning so much. I'm enjoying this every minute of it. Thank you so much for today's conversation, Joe. What are you most excited about? That's why I'm excited about a lot of things that I'm hearing that you're sharing with us. And I want to talk about a few different things. This bonus section, I don't have an outline, but I really want to be here to just say, if I put myself in your shoes, what are you most excited about right now?
I'm first off, I'm appreciative of you having me on the podcast. This is a great opportunity, and it's actually a really good time for me to actually verbalize what I'm excited about, because I have a lot of stuff written down, but when you tell someone or you talk about it, it's different. And my passion right now, I recently got married in June of this year.
Congratulations.
And it has been amazing. My wife is she's unbelievable. And I just love getting to know her every single day, learning even more every single moment of what she's more passionate about, what her dreams are, what inspires her. I thought I knew that while we were dating, and marriage just takes it to a new level. And it's been a blast getting to know my new stepdaughter, who happens to be almost the same age as my daughters. So currently right now we have a 14-year-old, soon to be 14-year-old this month now, and a 16-year-old. So there's never a dull moment. 3 teenage girls, and getting to see their personalities. So as I transition from the Marine Corps, I am excited about the choices I'm going to have to spend more time with them and just invest in our relationships, learn more about myself as well through them. And the other thing I guess I should mention too is we do so much together. The passion we have, I am a person of faith, and we explore that together. Awesome. Watching everyone grow. My daughters volunteer in the children's nursery at school at the church. Awesome. My wife and I attend small groups where we get to learn more about each other, more about building relationships, and every moment is just exciting. So I don't know what God has planned for me next. I know what I'm passionate about, but I'm remaining open to see where He leads me, and just having fun with it every step of the way.
I love it. Do us a favor, please. Can you give us their names?
Wife and the girls. My wife's name is Sarah, and then Jayla is my 16-year-old. Maddie is our 14-year-old, and then Alyssa is the one that's soon to be 14. She is a New Year's Eve baby, and you can bet that all 4 of them will watch this podcast, and they'll give me some feedback on it. I got to tell a quick story. My daughters, we talked earlier about the importance of being vulnerable, being open, and I remember the first time my daughters, I was just going through a really rough time in life, and my suitcases were all full. I had, the resilience was gone, and it was the first time my daughters really saw my emotion, and they told me, they said, "Wow, Dad, we never knew you struggled. We thought you had it all together. We thought you had it figured out." And it hit me like a rock. Like, wow, no, that is not what life is all about.
Right.
Life is not only about the mountaintops. Mm-hmm. And I started realizing that it was time for them they were teenagers now. And I had somehow led them to believe that life has no struggles for me. Mm-hmm. And I started having to have some real conversations about my journey with them, the things that I thought I was protecting them from. I started having to teach them, you're going to hit some valleys. And here is how you prepare yourself to come through those valleys. I haven't always been on the mountaintop, and I'm glad they have that strong, positive image of me. But I realized that it was time to show them the real emotion behind all the struggles as well. And that was a big turning point for me and my family.
Ooh, I know exactly why you're excited about that. I do. I hear the shift in the tone of your voice when you started to share in this section, on this bonus section, not to lower anything else you've done, because they're great. They're amazing things. We got a chance to learn in your career, and we got a chance to see, the challenges that you faced and you've overcome and came through were nothing short of great. And to see now to your excitement, to be, there with your family. I want to thank the wife and the daughters right now personally, just for all you do to support Joe and be there to allow him to be. The fact that he is so willing, and I'll say this right now, Joe, your willingness to have this courage to be vulnerable is almost, in my experience, is almost counterculture of what is taught and expected. Not just as men or not just as leaders, but it's almost counterculture, right? It's like, we don't want to show our weakness, and we don't want to show that part, right? Maybe we'll talk about it a little, but I know for myself, it was really hard to learn how to cry in front of people.
Yeah.
You know, I was a private when my grandmother was really close in my upbringing. If you listen to the podcast, you hear me talk about her several times. But even at her passing, I couldn't cry at that young age. But privately, I'd cry strong and heavy, and it was intense. You know, and I carried that for a long time until same thing with me, you know, with having a support and the love of my wife and my family here, really helped me and encouraged me to have that courage to be vulnerable. So knowing from someone in that position, and experiencing that, I just want to thank your wife and your daughters for what they do to kind of help build that leader, build who you are right now and who you're continuing to become. I'm excited that we're talking now in a sense of retirement and what this conversation could be in the next 3 to 5 years, you know, to see in a sense of what, like you said, what does God have in store? You know, that willingness to say, God, I'm here and I'm willing to continue to show up no matter what it is.
Absolutely. You have to be.
Let's do a fun question. With your traveling and everything else and your experiences, if there was one place you could take your family today, where would you go?
It's funny you said family. My answer is Switzerland. And my wife would say without kids. But we watch a lot of shows and she's a nature person. She opens up my eyes to realize the most simple beauty in everything. And every time a show comes on that has Switzerland in the background, I can just watch and I see how her eyes light up. And even though I would love to explore my daughters to that as well, expose them to that, that might have to be a separate trip. You know? But yeah, Switzerland would be high on the list. I've never been. I've been probably all over the world on a lot of military trips as well as personal. But that's the one thing, every time I see that light in her eyes, I would like to see her experiencing that in person. And I get the joy of making her happy, which also makes me happy.
That's a great place to be. I've never been to Switzerland and I'd love to visit there one day. If you get there before I do, I'll look for the pictures that you post and you share. And maybe we'll even continue to have a coffee. And our work is aligned in so many ways and our value system is aligned in so many ways. I'm confident that there'll be much more that will happen after today's podcast. Colonel Joe, thank you for your time today. For those that are listening right now, if you was somebody that was, you know, listening to a podcast and you're driving, and you seen this conversation and you decided to push play, if you could take a moment to share one thing with them that you wish someone told you in that moment. If they're driving to work, they're running their business, they're newer in their business, maybe they just joined the service and they're coming up, but they're going through this season of leadership where there's multiple facets happening. What's one thing that comes to mind? I know there's a lot, but one last thing, if you could share it before we wrap up today.
Ask for help. Whatever you're doing in life doesn't mean anything is wrong. You're doing something in life. You could be involved in trying to run a 5K. Ask for help. Form a team. Just have your network of people that you can reach out to for help before you need it. And if you are already in a position that you do need it, then now is even more important. But you don't have to do life alone. Life is not meant to be spent alone. It's meant to have relationships. And you start by just asking someone for help.
I can't think of a better way to wrap up a great conversation today. That's a reminder I think I would need from myself growing up, right? You want to do things by yourself, especially if you're having to learn patience. And I was not a patient person growing up, so I wanted things done right away and I just wanted to do it myself. But there's such a power in connecting with others when you ask for help. There's such an expansion of your mind and even of your heart when you start to reach out. With that being said, thank you so much for listening to Leader Seats today. Join us on the next one. If anyone wants to connect with you, is there a certain way through social media? If they have questions, want to know what you're doing in leadership, what would be the best way? Should I just put it in the notes below, or is there some way they can go?
Yeah, you can absolutely put it in the note below. People are welcome to connect on any of the social media platforms. I'm on the popular ones, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I spend the majority of my time on LinkedIn, but I use my full name, Joseph Delaney, nothing complicated. And you're welcome to connect. I look forward to forming a relationship.
Awesome. We'll do that. Look in the notes. If you're listening to this or if you're watching this on YouTube, look right in the notes and we'll have a link that takes you right there on all of Joe's personal social media platforms, right? So you can get connected and continue this conversation. Thank you for listening to Leader Seeds, where we believe that your investment in the seeds of high impact and healthy leadership will pay far better dividends than anything else you can do out there. This is the greatest way that you can build a foundation for the leaders that last the test of time. My name is Paul Keller Mossman here, wrapping up a conversation with Colonel Joe Delaney. Thank you so much for being with us today.